So, who knows the answer to this? The teacher asked. The whole class was silent as they looked down at their desks and scratched their heads. Suddenly a hand was raised. Yes, it was me. Just me. In fact, physics was my forte subject, so the question on the board didn't baffle me, so I gave an in-depth answer. The teacher looked surprised, then she smiled at me and said, "It looks like we have a budding Einstein in our midst." All this praise was a little embarrassing. Also, I noticed that all the girls in the class were looking at me with admiring eyes. Meanwhile, I overheard one boy whisper, "Where did this robot come from?" I unconsciously glanced over at Vivian. She was sitting in the corner of the classroom and even she was gawping over at me. Meeting my gaze, she immediately pouted and looked away. For the rest of the day, I continued to impress my teachers and classmates. In English Lit, I recited a verse from Twelfth Night, and in math, I wrote down the formula for pi on the board. Hey, being smart has its highlights, and it was good to get recognition for my brains. I'd already been recruited into both the physics club and the quiz team. Hey, turned out this new school was not that bad. I'm Easton, and if you haven't seen part 1 of my story, I advise you to go and check it out. So, I'm only at this elite school because my sister Grace is marrying an older rich man named Owen. Then, there's Vivian, Owen's daughter. I haven't quite worked her out yet, but she seems like trouble. As the first days went, mine was a success, so I was grinning as I walked toward the bus stop. Suddenly, a girl caught up with me and patted me on the shoulder. "Hey, I'm Lila. We're in the same class." "Hi, Lila. I'm Easton." I smiled at her. "You're so good at, well, everything," she giggled. "So, I like physics too. I think we should study together sometime." She chewed on her lip as she twizzled a strand of her hair around her finger. "Yes, sure." Suddenly, a nudge distracted me. "Vivian." She swaggered past us, then looked back at me and pouted. Seeing this, Lila rolled her eyes and tutted out, "That girl is such a nuisance. I'd recommend you steer clear of the likes of her." I nodded at Lila's words, but kept my eyes on Vivian. At that moment, bump. Vivian, with her head so high, striking her arrogant walk, had crashed straight into some nerd who was walking while looking at his phone. I winced as I watched her fall on top of him, and his phone flung away and smashed as it hit the ground. She blushed and scrambled to get up, frantically took out the money from her wallet and stuffed it into the boy's hand and hurried away. "Huh? What an obnoxious girl," Lila snarked. "Thinking daddy's money solves everything? How ignorant." Sigh. I can only give her a shrug hearing those words, then quickly made my excuses about having to catch my bus. That night, I was watching Mythbusters on TV in the living room when I suddenly saw Grace running out of the bathroom screaming. Her skin had these red patches all over it, and she was crying out how there were dog hairs on her towel. At that moment, Vivian passed us. She looked Grace up and down, then smirked and said, "Oh my, our model looks like a lobster today." Grace was so angry that she somehow managed to turn even redder. "Vivian, you dare? Just you wait!" After that, Grace burst into the office and dragged Owen into the living room. Oh man, it was really serious this time. "Owen, look at me! I'm hideous and it's down to that spiteful child!" She pointed at a still smirking Vivian. "These tricks of hers are unacceptable!" She shook her arm vigorously, then stomped her feet on the floor. Owen frowned at Vivian, but she didn't show any guilt. Instead, she just shrugged and said, "I have no idea what she's talking about." The atmosphere in the house was so tense that I literally couldn't breathe. Seeing this, Grace continued, "Honey, it's time we sent her to boarding school. The teachers there will be better equipped to manage her and help her change." Owen listened attentively, then nodded. Vivian's smirk dropped, and she glared at Grace, then turned to Owen and said harshly, "Dad, why do you always listen to her? She's just an outsider. I'm your daughter." "Okay, let's take it slow. I'll see what's the best for you." Then he turned to Grace and said softly, "Come on, darling, let's go get you some medicine." Then he led Grace to their bedroom. I thought that the threat of boarding school would change Vivian, but no. It only seemed to entice her more. One day during dinner, Owen's phone rang. He went out of the room to answer it, and when he returned, his face was all scrunched up in anger. Then he slammed his fist on the table. Vivian, you're causing trouble again? How dare you break in and steal stuff from the chemistry lab? I really have no words. She didn't respond, still focused on her plate, which drove Owen even madder. He shouted, "Your teacher said if you make any more minor mistakes, they'll expel you. Is that what you want?" "Oh my God, expelled from school? That would bring shame to our family," Grace added. Vivian glared at Grace, but she still continued. "I did tell you to send her to boarding school, but you refused." Then suddenly, her eyes lit up as if she had just come up with some crazy idea. Then she turned to look at me with a smile that sent chills down my spine. "Ah, I know. Easton's a top student, and he's in most of Vivian's classes, isn't he? So he can supervise her. Maybe there will be good results." "What? No way!" Vivian and I shouted in unison. While I was silently cursing Grace's crazy idea, Owen seemed quite amused by it. "Yeah, that sounds good." "No way! Who the hell is he to monitor me?" "Well, if you don't like it, then I suggest you go up to your room and start packing for boarding school." Vivian didn't say anything else, just sulked and stormed back to her room. Owen shook his head wearily, then told me to go have a little talk with him in his office. "Easton, please help me keep an eye on Vivian. Honestly, I don't want to send her away to a boarding school, but I can't sit around and wait for her to be expelled either." This put me in a dilemma here. I didn't want any involvement with this stubborn girl, but I couldn't say no to Owen. Seeing me hesitate, he continued, "Please, she's a good kid. She's just had a tough time and she's so angry at everything. She's so angry at me." And yeah, you guess it, I gave in and agreed to help him. Then he immediately listed off a series of tasks. Don't let Vivian get anything lower than a C. Don't let her hang out with any bad friends, including Carter, her current unpleasant boyfriend. Follow her closely and don't let her break any school rules. Make sure she takes studying seriously for once. These sounded simple, right? For normal people, maybe, but Vivian was far from normal. Instead, she was troublesome, cunning, and uncooperative. I had no idea how I was going to convince a rebel like Vivian to abide by any of these rules. But I'd told Owen I'd help. So now I had to stick to my word. So from then on, I officially became Vivian's tutor and butler. I had to tutor her every day, keep an eye on her 24/7, and of course, put up with her mischievous pranks to escape my management. "Please, focus! Why do you keep on staring out the window and daydreaming when the exams are right around the corner?" I got really mad at Vivian. "I don't want to, but I have a headache, so I just can't concentrate." She wasn't fooling me with that fake pity face. I immediately pulled a tablet of aspirin out of my shirt pocket and tossed my head to signal her to take it, so that she could keep studying. Vivian was dumbfounded, picked up her pen, and started doing the homework. But within just less than 5 minutes, she turned to me and asked, "Hey, Easton, do you like playing games?" I flipped the pages of the book and reluctantly said yes. Clearly, she was just waiting for that, as she immediately took out her Nintendo Switch, excitedly gave it to me and said, "So you can play this, and I'll sleep for a bit. I stayed up so late last night watching movies. When the time's up, just tell my dad that we finished studying." Before I can say anything, she'd already jumped onto her bed and wrapped herself in blanket. Ugh, so frustrating. But then an idea popped in my head. Well, then let's change the learning method. Language shower. How does that sound? Then I reached for the mini speaker on the table, played a Spanish audio lesson at the highest volume, and placed it right by her ears. She quickly covered her head with a pillow, but I didn't give up and continued pushing the speaker close. After rolling around in bed for a while, she finally admitted defeat, and with a frowning face, went back over to the desk and said, "Okay, just stop this crazy torture right away, please. You want me to sit here and study, right?" I folded my arms and smiled smugly. Ha! This girl is not that hard to handle. I didn't share Vivian's carefree attitude. Instead, I was so anxious that she would fail her exams and I'd get the blame. I even had to beg her, "Hey, please, focus on studying literature, please. If you get an F, then I will be dead meat." "Huh? That's none of my business, Vivian sneered. I desperately passed her my essay. Here, I've already prepared this for your reference. You just have to memorize it. She quickly scanned it once, then dropped it down on the table and replied, Nah, you can learn it by yourself. I have better things to do. Helplessly, I picked up the essay and read it out loud. I read it again and again, with the hope that while she was polishing her nails, she could remember a few sentences. At first, Vivian seemed annoyed, but then she giggled and said, Okay, let me learn on my own. Your poor face looks so funny. What a miracle! She actually started reading through the notes, but to be honest, I didn't expect much. But you know what? The most unexpected thing happened. When we were standing outside of the school gates, she showed me her exam results. B's and C's, and not one D. Man, this felt even better than when I got an A+. Well, almost. I was about to congratulate her when I heard someone shout her name. Then I turned around to see some kids walking over to her. Oh no. Were these the bad influences Owen told me to keep her away from?